Welcome, this is my first devlog for a little platformer game I'm developing, all about being a primitive hunter-gatherer in a strange fantasy world. The name still needs to be decided, but for now the working title is Scavenger. Now then, the first obstacle I decided to tackle when starting development on this game was platformer pathfinding. I knew it would be a challenge, but man, it took a whole lot of trial and error to get to an acceptable level. For this game, I want both the monsters you hunt and the tribesmen you hunt alongside to have a higher level of intelligence than a Goomba. Hunts are, after all, the primary focus of this game, and I need them to be both fun and challenging, which means I need good AI. Now, the first step to make a good platform AI is to create a good pathfinding system. Of course, I want AI to be able to walk across platforms towards their targets. That's the easy part. But their target won't always be on the same platform they are on, so they can't walk to it. They have to jump. I want them to be able to jump between platforms in the shortest path toward their target, basically enabling them to move like the player could. While researching how I could do this, I realized just how much 2D platformer games cheap out on their enemy pathfinding, almost more than any other genre. It's often the case that the enemy can either fly, enabling them to ignore the constraints of gravity and platforms, or they just move right and left mindlessly. In the best cases I found, a grounded enemy would run in a horizontal direction of their target and jump if they detect a raised platform in front of them. But this has constraints. Number 1, they can't jump onto platforms off the ground, and 2, they have no sense of planning, which often leaves the enemy to get stuck easily, something that players will definitely exploit. There are, of course, exceptions to this, namely Rainworld, which is one of my favorite games and inspiration for this project. It has brilliant AI. Just go play and find out just how frustratingly good lizard AI can be. So anyway, I need to do some pathfinding. I'll use A* naturally, but what I first need to worry about is how I can construct a pathfinding node graph that includes movement between platforms, such as jumping and dropping. Dropping is easy. All we do is box cast straight off the edge to see what platforms we encounter on the way down. Just to clarify before I continue, I do have separate graph connections per enemy type, so that I can account for each enemy's type's size and maximum jump force. So for the dropping example, the box cast is done with the bounds of the enemy's collider. With jumping, I initially struggled to find a way to determine which nodes can be jumped to and from other nodes. And I thought about placing the nodes manually. That wouldn't be too bad if I just had to place jump connections between the edges of platforms, but I also wanted the enemy to be able to jump from in the middle of platforms, so manually placing them would be just completely infeasible and also too time consuming. So I decided to get to programming a way to determine which nodes could be jumped to and from. So I took all the pairs of nodes that weren't on the same platform and were within a reasonable distance together, and ran a sort of physics simulation between the two to determine if they could be connected by a jump. To actually run the physics simulation, we need to know what jump velocity to use. A jump velocity that, if it exists, avoids obstacles and gets the AI to exactly where it needs to go. So what we want to do is determine a good path for our enemy to jump from here to here. So how do we do that? Well, consider these two nodes. In their way is a formidable wall. We want to keep the jump velocity that allows us to reach the other node, while at the same time keeping us from colliding with obstacles in the way. So, considering that we're dealing with arbitrary geometry, the best way to do this is to iterate through a list of possible jump velocities and find the one that fits best. Now I'll link the article below, it shows more math on the subject, but for now we're just going to cover the basics here. So first we need to generate a list of possible jump velocities that we can iterate through. We will be using the time that a jump takes to make it easy to represent jump velocities, as these two things map one to one with each other. Meaning, given a jump time, we can calculate a jump velocity that takes that exact amount of time to complete. So we iterate through the times between a 0-second jump and a jump that takes whatever maximum time the programmer set. In this clip, several jump arcs are rendered between 2 points. The red arc is the jump that takes the least amount of time to complete, while the green arc is the jump that takes the most time to complete. And the yellow arc is the jump that takes the least amount of energy, or the lowest magnitude velocity, to complete. This low energy jump, identified by T_low energy, is where we begin our search for the best fit jump, as it tends to produce good results. Meaning it produces a reasonable jump velocity that isn't overkill high, while also not being too low and flat. So now we start iterating, checking each jump velocity for collisions along its arc. If it has a collision, it won't work and we move on to the next one. As was said before, we start at the lowest energy jump and expand out from there in both directions. In my case, between both red and yellow and green, there are 25 equally spaced intervals of jump times that will be tested. Each jump time is converted into a jump velocity with this equation. And as I said before, in the article there's more math on this subject. You can learn how to derive these formulas for yourself, so go ahead and check it out. So, if we were able to find a jump velocity that works, we simply add a connection between the two nodes that stores the jump velocity that worked. With the graph connections all made, it's just a matter of the good old A-star algorithm, which can now use the jump node connections just as well as the walking connections to create a good traversing path for the AI. And with that, thanks for watching. I'll be talking more about the actual gameplay in the next devlog, but I think this was a fun experiment worth sharing, especially since there are barely any articles on this particular problem. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the comments.